Hey, my name is Indira Camacho,
And I am Don Reddick.
and today we're going to be presenting on the bystander effect. So, the bystander effect is one of the most reproduced and influential constructs to emerge from social psychology. Fun fact for y'all. And we are going to explain it a little bit more in depth. So, on this picture on the left side, this is just gives you a general demonstration of how the bystander effect takes place. So on the left side, we see obviously a person who is drowning, and people are watching it happen. No one is doing anything actively to help, but they do have like their phones out. Um, this could be one way the bystander effect has been explained by social psychologists. And on the right side, we have a little bit more of a graphic image cartoon, but we hope it's not too graphic for y'all. This is obviously a man who got injured, maybe run over by that car or whatever. And we see two people who see him, and they're exclaiming, "That poor guy, someone should do something," not doing anything themselves to help. So again, the bystander effect is seeing something happen but not doing anything about it. Okay? And before we get more into details about the bystander effect, we have a little activity for you all, and this is just going to be um, something to kind of exercise your moralities, your thinking, what you would do realistically, and we ask that you answer them honestly, or if um, the suggestions we have do not align with yours, go ahead and think about it and reflect on it. We will give you time between. Okay, let's begin. Um, so in this picture, you obviously see that a woman um, is out with her family, and they can only afford one meal, and it's one of the children's birthdays. You're at this restaurant, you see this family, trying to make means of what they got. What would you do in that situation? Would you talk to them? Would you sit with them? Would you just pass them by and say, too bad? Um, So give yourself, think a couple seconds to reflect on that. What would you do if you were there? All right, next one. Um, so for this one, I think a lot of us have seen this happen or have been that person on the side of the road ourselves. We see a man who is obviously stranded on the side of the highway, a busy highway, even though there's one semi. Disregard that. So he is just stranded on the side of the highway. What would you do? Would you stop and help, or would you just keep driving by? Because you got other things, right? Couple seconds of that. Right, the next activity.
So you are at Walmart and you're casually walking around, and then the next thing you know, you hear this big ruckus, and you go over to see what it is, and it's a huge inflatable that just has destroyed all the things on the shelves. What do you do? Do you laugh? Do you help? Or do you just ignore it and keep walking? What would you do?
Couple seconds with that. I know it's a really flamboyant picture. Okay, the next one. All right, this one's a little bit more serious. You see an older guy um, approach this young teenage girl in a restaurant, and he offers her money for sex and tells her he'll wait outside. You hear this and you see this. What would you do in this situation? Right? Would you go in and check for the girl's safety? Would you approach the guy? Would you have broken up that conversation? Right? Couple of seconds. All right.
So you're in a building, and the next thing you know, you hear a guy in pain, and you go look, and you see him on the floor. His papers are everywhere, and you can see that he's in pain. What do you do? Do you rush off to your next class, or do you help him?
All right. This is an interesting picture because a lot of things are happening, right? We have a couple who's in a really intense argument, and it's gradually getting heated in this restaurant. Would you diffuse the situation, or do you mind your business? All right, go on.
So you are on a subway train and you hear a man become very hostile with another passenger. You can see in this picture that others are just watching. So do you just sit and listen and stare with the others? Or do you try to resolve the altercation between the two men?
All right, so in broad daylight, in a crowded parking lot, you see this man sorry. You see this man picking a car lock and attempting to steal it. Um, do you intervene or do you stay quiet and just keep walking? Right?
So you're on a busy sidewalk in the middle of a city and you see this guy pickpocketing a woman's purse, stealing her wallet. What do you do? Do you approach the situation or do you look the other way and continue with your day?
So for now, there are no correct answers to any of these. Obviously, we wanted to do this activity to kind of exercise your moralities where you would lie on the scale of whether you're a bystander or an intervener. Um, Again, we want you to reflect on your own personal tendencies of being a bystander. And one thing that we did find throughout our research with this study is that bystanders tend to think that, one, it's none of my business, right? I bet some of y'all, when we were going through the slides, you're probably like, that's not my business. I'll stay in my own lane type of thing. But that's the bystander effect happening for you. There's also that fear of getting hurt in the situation, too. There's some situations we portrayed that were kind of like might have repercussions for you if you were to intervene, but at the same time, um, you're kind of challenged: should I do what's right or should I not get involved? Right? The powerlessness to help the victim, powerlessness in like I want to help you, but I don't know how to type of feeling, right? And then there was some cases, right? You feel like the victim deserves it, and this kind of like intertwine with the second one, or you side more with the perpetrator or the person doing it. Like, oh, I might side with him more, so I'll let him do his own thing because I believe in that type of thing. There's all kinds of, please excuse that. There are all kinds of different reasonings for the bystander effect, um, or what bystanders tend to think, but these are the most common ones that we collected from these studies. And also, just to kind of put out this disclaimer, none of these portrayals were real at all. We took them from like fictional portrayals from like that famous YouTube channel that What Would You Do if you were in that situation or if you saw that. We took some, made our own scenarios off of Google. Again, these are not real, but they can happen in real life, maybe more severe, less severe. We just want you to know that we did not take these pictures from real life scenarios. Okay. And so we're going to move on into the research studies that were shared. But first, we want to talk about the spark of it all, right? So this is Kitty Genovese up here in the right hand corner. This young woman was unfortunately murdered in 1964 when she was here, in this. I think our faces might be blocking a little bit, but bear with us. This is her neighborhood, right? And she was 100 feet away from her home when she was approached by a perpetrator. His name was Winston Mosley, um, who came up to her around 2:30 in the morning, repeatedly stabbed her, raped her, and eventually killed her, right? And this murder happened um, and lasts for about half an hour. People have investigated the situation, saying that 38 people were watching from their windows of this event happening and didn't actively do anything to come in and intervene, didn't do anything to stop her from getting murdered. They said that they just watched, like nobody like actively did anything. However, when further investigations came in, they found out that maybe some bystanders from their windows were calling the police, some were yelling. Um, there was no but there was still no people who would run down and like break it up.
No one took
And
action.
yeah, and this is what kind of triggered social psychologists into um, looking more into this concept of why didn't anybody help, and this led to more studies about the bystander effect. Social psychologists at that time also coined it the Genovese effect. So if we use that interchangeably throughout the PowerPoint, that's why. Okay, next one. So the first study happened in 1968. Again, the 60s were an interesting time because there was like lots of ways you can have fun with psychology, right? Like there's deception, there's distrust, there's no rules and regulations from the American Psychological Association yet. So these two individuals, this is Bibb Latney and John Darley, they had a bystander intervention in emergencies, diffusion of responsibility article, kind of investigating more about the diffusion of responsibility, which we will talk about a little bit later. So what they did for this study, this initial study that we're going off of, is that they took students from introductory courses of psychology at NYU, and they had these students listen with headphones to other person's stories who were in another room, right? So let me rephrase that again. So they took these subjects, right, from the university. They had them listen to another person in another room talk about a story. And there would be one storyteller who would fake having a seizure, right? Kind of show, deceiving them, trying to see what their reaction was. So what the experimenters recorded in this study was which subjects responded the most, the time of the response, and the group size influence. Right. So moving on to the next thing, the design of this research study, according to the article, was that it was an experimental and it was controlled. They had dependent variables and independent variables. Obviously, dependent variables were the time of response, who responded, the group size, right? The independent variables obviously were
The number of people
number of people
to be in the discussion group.
Yes, yeah. So why this research was needed is all like again the Genovese effect, the Kitty Genovese incident that happened. Wanted more investigation around the bystander effect, and they wanted more awareness for people to kind of see where society goes wrong with this, or could go right, either one. So the findings of this research, in summary, we have pictures here to kind of illustrate our points a little bit more. So the findings of the research, we're looking at the left side right now. The bigger the size of the group, the less responses that were received. Okay, and this was found when they were doing those different trials with different group influences and all that. The men, also, I just wanted to point out that in this study, there were more female psychology students than there were male psychology students. So, but at the same time, we still found that men were less responsive to help than women were in this study. Okay. And then why are these findings important? Well, this is to kind of explain that how the diffusion of responsibility is one explanation of the bystander effect. So diffusion of responsibility is when you think that somebody else will do it because it's not your responsibility to hold in that moment. So if we look at this graphic up here, we see that there are three individuals all thinking about different things. One's late for work, one's got to catch the subway, and one said somebody else will help him. Diffusion of responsibility would be more of this young man walking to the left side here, saying somebody else will help him, so I'm not going to pay attention to it. That would be one explanation of how diffusion of responsibility would look like, right? And then we'll move on to these studies.
Okay. So the first additional study was on the article The Responsive Bystander. So there are 4 trials within this study. Trial 1, the effects of group size and social relationships. So trial 1, the effect that group size and social relationships type can have bystanders who are witnesses to violence. They saw increasing group size inhibited intervention when bystanders were strangers. The findings of study 1, or trial 1, the greater the group size, the less participants were willing to get involved or to intervene directly. Was shown, however, when the bystanders were imagined as friends, then the greater the group size, the more participants were willing to get involved or to intervene directly. And then over here, In trial 2, it had extended findings from trial 1. So in trial 2, they did use extended findings, and that they raised the salience of gender identity. The social category members' group size interacted with context-specific norms that both inhibited and encouraged helping. The findings of trial 2 was the research article does provide evidence for the interaction of group size and social categories with regard of helping behavior. Female participants were less likely to intervene in the presence of others imagined as strangers, but they were more likely to intervene in a group, say they were her friends. Also, when there is no consequent, no coincidence,
Consonants.
consonants, sorry,
No agreement, no compatibility.
between the identity of fellow bystanders and victim, other norms can be activated potentially.
So both of these trials kind of experimented with commonality and how well you relate on a social level to the victim when you are a bystander.
And then a continuation of the study. So trial 3 had physical co-presence. Uh, they used physical co-presence and gender identity to examine these social category effects. The trial used physical co-presence to explore the effects of group presence. So the findings of this trial was to demonstrate the importance of interaction of group size and social category memberships for understanding bystander behavior. In trial 4, it replicated these findings with a measure of real-life behavior. Participants could be exposed to a request for real-life help in the study. When exposed to a real-life request for help, female participants were more likely to help after being in a group of other women, but less likely to help after being in a group with other men. And men were more likely to help after being in a group with other women, but more likely to help or be less likely to help when being in a group with other men. And the overall finding for the trial 4 was that the study shows support for the importance of the interaction of group size and social category composition of group on helping behavior. So more of the overall findings for the rest of the studies would be that there is evidence that the interaction of group membership and group size in trial 1, 2, and 3 are regarding intention to intervene in violence might generalize to other kinds of helping behaviors. The findings indicate that the bystander effect is not a generic consequence of increasing group size. When bystanders share group-level psychological relationships, group size can encourage as well as inhibit helping.
Right, and that's the study on the responsive bystander. How likely is it for you to respond to the situation and moving?
So for the additional study, number 2, we looked into the positive bystander effect article. And this is a field study that looked at the presence of passive bystander. It says that there is an abundant, I can't say that word,
Abundance
of evidence that is present of passive bystanders reduces the probability that people will intervene in emergencies. They look between the presence of a passive bystander, one that is either present or non-present, in a simulated bike theft, which had about 25 participants who would potentially see the theft of the bike. They thought that there would be expected negative consequences on a scale to low to high when they predicted intervention behavior when no physical victim is present. The method was to observe the interventions versus non-interventions behavior, and they recreated the scene about 120 different times. So the result of this study was that there happened to be more bystanders that helped in dangerous situations rather than non-dangerous situations. And so in the dangerous situations, there was a guy who looked fierce. He was wearing some more like street clothes, and he looked a little like you wouldn't want to fight with him. Um, and then in the non-dangerous situation, it was more of a man who was wearing a suit, and he looked like he was a businessman. So the findings of this study was that the study did show that there was a three-way interaction between expected negative consequences, uh, bystander presence, and the helping response. They also found that there was more evidence appearing by bystanders that bystanders do not always have negative effects on an individual's willingness to help. And another finding is that an additional bystander increases individual intervention in situations where the expected negative consequences for the compared to situations where the expected negative consequences for the were for low. I
For
don't
the
think
helper
that.
we're low.
Does that make sense?
I think it does. So again, what this study was just talking about was that, there were certain looks to these individuals who were supposedly the thieves of the bike. When the person had the suit on, people were less responsive to it. People assume it's a good guy just having a bike, or they could have just been like, he's stealing the bike, but I'm not gonna intervene. But when they saw that it was a violent situation, or what they would like stigmatize and stereotype as a violent situation. This man had on, these kinds of clothes, like
He looked a certain way.
he looked a certain way, he had casuals, and he was stealing the bike. Then people would intervene. So again, the results, the non-dangerous versus dangerous, we saw that there was um, more intervention when it looked like a more dangerous situation. So this is another study that might have supported why bystander effect occurs and whether you be passive or an active one. All right. So this moves us into the theories and concepts from this class that we wanted to connect to the bystander effect. So when we learned about the social exchange theory in altruism, why do people do good things for other people? Well, the theory states that human interactions are transactions that aim to maximize rewards and minimize one's costs, right? So type of thing like I would do this because I would expect to feel good either internally or like I would reap rewards externally, etc. So people might intervene in situations because I'm gonna feel good about it afterwards, right? This could be one explanation for why people might intervene, and then negate the bystander effect. Another thing, probably another concept that we wanted to talk about was the social responsibility norm. This is the expectation that people will help those needing help. You know, if I see like a man on the floor, I will help them because I feel like it's my responsibility to, or like I feel like I should be able to get this person up, right? Um, this kind of goes against the diffusion of responsibility where you think somebody else will, right? So the social responsibility norm kind of says, no, I have an expectation that, those who need help, I will help. You know? And the last concept that we wanted to touch on was empathy. We saw in these studies too that empathy, the higher empathy higher the empathy in a person, the less likely they are to be a bystander. So again, empathy is the vicarious experience of putting of another's feelings. So you put yourself in another person's shoes, like do I intervene or do I not? I feel what he's feeling, or like I feel like I know that's wrong, but would my own personal fears get in the way of um, help doing what's right? So these theories and these concepts from the class and looking at the bystander effect, we kept these in mind, hoping to remind you about um, where do you lie on this scale? Like, where are you a bystander or are you an intervener? And so this leads us to our implications for society and the bystander effect. We wanted to put in some fun little graphics here, just to kind of show you and make a point about what this would mean if we were to present these studies. So again, when they were fully investigating the Kitty Genovese murder, and they were wondering why were all these people watching and no one doing anything. See in the upper left corner, there's a man or there's an individual. I can't tell his or her or they gender identity, but there's an individual who obviously is in need of help, and we see people just walking by. And this is simulated, so it's not a real this is not a real man. But we see people walking by, right, and not doing anything to actively see if this person is hurt or is dead or does he need help. Um, so one implication for society is to kind of question like your own moral values, your own actions. Like, do you be like those people and just walk by? Do you actually go in and you say hello, like, are you okay? or would you like kind of abide by this bystander effect and say it's none of my business? I am going to get hurt in this situation. What if he is? What if, right? In the bottom middle GIF, in the middle moving picture, we see a flight attendant and a passenger kind of getting into a heated debate. You don't know what it's about, right? I don't know what it's about. It's about, it could be like an argument. It could be the passengers complaining about something, or who knows, you know? But what did you like? If you were a passenger on the plane, would you like look at that and say like, not this again, or like, as none of my business, like, or can we just go, like, would you be altruistic? Would you step in and say like, hello, sir, can we please stop this, or can we get on with our flight, or do you just sit back and watch the show
like everyone else?
Yeah, and so this would tell us that there are obviously some social issues in um, like what matters to us and how we push for it and how we fight for it. Um, Yeah, this leads us to the third graphic in the top. I am so sorry if you're colorblind, but we see a green hand on the left side, and we see a red hand on the right side, and we see a blue hand coming into the middle. This is supposed to be a metaphorically symbolic picture, to resemble like intervening and doing what's right, and coming between good or bad, or um, just not being a bystander. So another implication we want to communicate right now is we just want y'all to reflect on like where you are in society, what social issues are most deserving of like having somebody intervene, and um, yeah, we just want y'all to know that the bystander effect is real, and there are people out there, but only a small percentage. And should the group size matter? Should the group size be smaller for you to intervene, or does it even matter at that point? Yeah. Um, Don, do you have any other things you would like to say?
I'm just like pointing this out, like it's a real problem, because as you can see in these little gifs, that people are not happy. Like the one with the passengers upset, and the other one where the person is laying on the ground, he obviously is in some distress. So I hope that this presentation is kind of like a eye opener. Like, hey, maybe I have seen things like this before. Like, say at Walmart or something, or anywhere, you see something but you just keep walking. So maybe this presentation will help and maybe take some action. So yeah.
So we hope you all have learned something today, and please don't be bystanders, or but also be safe. But yeah.